Worldwide crew on Reality Pop is back. I'm your host, Chris Swanepoel, and with me today, as always, is Riley. Riley, how's things over in New South Wales at the moment?
Yeah, g'day, Chris. Great to be here. It's been an action-packed week, which has at least kept me somewhat distracted from the lockdown going on here in New South Wales. So many blindsides, so many different twists to discuss this week. Certainly some controversial moments there. What with Kez's Idol and the Redemption Rock, but yeah, really excited to discuss this week's crazy week. So many twists being thrown at us this season.
Yeah, 100%. I'm looking forward to talking about the show. You know, Auckland has just gone into a level 4 lockdown for only the second time in 18 months since COVID's become a thing. So really, you know, to look at Survivor and get some sort of an escape, I had to wait this week when I watched all my episodes. I didn't have time to watch it live every night, so I had to go back and watch all of it in quick succession leading into this one. And I tell you what, trying to avoid social media if you're not up to date, I found to be very, very difficult. So I may have spoiled myself a little bit on this last episode going into it. I didn't realize that Haley was going to be saved by Redemption Rock in the game, and I didn't know who the second person was going to be, but I saw a photo of Haley's torch being snuffed, and I thought to myself, man, have I got this so wrong? Because I've been thinking the whole season, Haley's winning. And then I saw that photo and it was shocking to me because I thought, does this mean George is going to win the show? But then I came to realization, no, she's going to Redemption Rock. She's probably still going to win the season, Riley.
Yeah, well, a George win would still be very, very shocking. But yeah, I was scared, obviously, Haley being my first pick in the draft this year and Baden being my second pick as well. Really, to see those two go to Redemption Rock, it was almost saving grace for my draft team there. But no, it's going to be really interesting to see how Haley comes back into the game next week and whether she can really recover from that. It really seems like next week we're going to see George and Haley back at it again, fighting once again to determine who is the king or queen of the Fire Tribe, which is, mind you, a bizarre tribe name, but now at the merge, they had to come up with something.
Hey, it could have been the Queen Elizabeth tribe, you know, so I mean, they dodged that bullet at least. Marcus, welcome to the live stream, and also Anthony, welcome to the stream as well. Anthony here says that he is big in capital letters mad about this week, and Anthony, myself and Riley had a bit of a chat off. You know, we kind of had 5 minutes prior to going live here, and I think we're all in the same camp where there's a few things we're not too happy about. So we're going to definitely get into all of the controversial twists and everything that's happening this week. I'm looking forward to talking to you about that, Riley. And I think let's start off with the whole Danny Haley rivalry. You know, last week we spoke about the fact that Haley betrayed Danny and had Danny as the option B for that vote where they finally got rid of Simon, the challenge beast, just making it a little bit easier here for Emmett going into the merge. And Danny is not someone that is going to forgive and forget very easily. She's going into this merge with a little bit of a chip on her shoulder, and you know, when we see them there at the challenge, when it comes to the merge, she has a bit of a word with Emmett saying that Haley is the person that we should be targeting. She's playing a really, really good game. And we knew that Haley's been playing flashy up until this point. In my mind, Haley is the perfect player to play in the new 26-day Survivor US season, but she's going to face a bit of an uphill battle here. And, you know, George uses this opportunity to talk to Haley and say, let's have a bit more of a conversation when we get to camp. And when you're looking at the two players here between Haley and George, you know, love him or hate him, he's a player that's flexible and is willing to move in between the different cracks and alliances within the game. And it's something that I do admire in his gameplay.
Yeah, absolutely. George has really managed to manipulate every possible facet of the game. And really, from Kara being voted out and being left all on his own on the Brains tribe, he's managed to recover really well, obviously saved by that tribe swap and given the opportunity to ingratiate himself with the former Brawn in the name of Kez, Emmett, and Gerald there. But really, even at the merge, he's worked his way in. He's managed to throw Haley under the bus, who he saw as his biggest adversary, while still also feeding information to the Brains tribe as well, which we'll definitely discuss that big blind side later. But yeah, for George, really emerging as a massive player, and I'm honestly shocked that he's got this far in the game and that he's still standing at this point. Every week we say, when is George going to go? He's playing way too big, way too flashy a game, but it seems like he's here to stay. He's just not dying. He is the cockroach at the moment.
Yeah, I'm shocked to still see George in the game at this point. I mean, I do love the flashiness and everything in this game. I mean, over here in this episode, he says that he's going to allow for Haley to become the queen of the Brains tribe, but he is going to be the king of the Fire tribe. So constantly wanting to be the king, constantly wanting to be that person that is going to be running the show, and constantly doing the numbers. Being a bit of a political operator. I one of the things I thought, great drinking game for us, moving forward would be if we were to have a shot every time George calls himself a king or every time he talks about his political career. I think we'd be smashed by the end of the week. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Same with plant-based Superman or whatever else it is. There's certainly some catchphrases that continue to be brought up again and again and again by those survivors this season.
I think the producers are sitting there and says to George, hey, tell us about how you're a king again. Tell us about your political career again so we can take that into consideration and how you do the numbers when you're out there. One of the other things here that happens in this episode is that, we see Kez spending a bit of time close to the pool, seeing a rock that is white. It looks like it's a little bit out of place compared to everything else. She's quite loud about it and tells everybody, hey, look at that rock. It looks like it's kind of out of place. She walks up to it and finds the idol in front of everyone and celebrates really loudly about it. Love or hate Kez, like I actually do like her as a character. Bad gameplay. I'm not too sure, and maybe someone in the chat will know. Was Kez a fan of the show before she played it? I think she could be really good at the show if she had another shot at it, but celebrating it in front of everybody here, super bad move, and especially with George being there seeing it.
Yeah, I think certainly when you're in that tribal environment around your alliance and you see something that's, out of the ordinary, a very clean rock in amongst a wall of otherwise dirty rocks, dusty rocks that have been sitting there for millions of years. She really didn't play it too well, I don't think. If I was in Kaz's position, maybe I wouldn't be as idol hungry as she was. Maybe sit back a little bit, watch the rock and, wait for everyone to disperse, maybe take a swim, wash your hair, something like that, and then sneakily do it. Obviously, it backfired for her immensely. She did think she had the faith of her alliance, though, but obviously there was a weasel in that alliance, being George, who really managed to expose her, and it ended up working against her. But for Kez to pull out that idol and really gloat in front of the rest of the tribe, not the best choice on her part, because it certainly exposed her as a potential target within that alliance.
Yeah, we've very rarely in Survivor seen it as something that's a success if people know about your idol. Your own alliance members need to think of a way that they can betray you. The opposition knows that you've got an idol, so they've got to work around that and blindside you. I've always been a fan of not letting anyone know if you've got the idol. I've become an even more bigger fan of that after the last couple of seasons of Survivor in South Africa and also this season, and seeing how people have been blindsided with idols. Like, I mean, I think she was the third person this season already. I'm bad with numbers and memory, but there's a lot of people here that have been blindsided with idols in their pocket. And definitely if you look at Simon getting voted out with 2 idols, Marcus does say here in the chat that she was a recruit who hadn't seen the show before, which does explain a lot, Marcus. I think she's got the ability to do well if she was ever to return in a future season. I did like her. She did remind me of Wentworth and probably kind of went out in a very similar position like Wentworth did the first time that she played the game as well, even though I know Wentworth was a bigger fan than what she was when she played the first show. She was already a really big fan. Also, Anthony, I do see this comment in regards to Haley. I don't think we'll address it right now. Just want to acknowledge I've seen it. We're probably going to address it a little bit later in the show because it's going to be a big talking point for us on the podcast today. So let's go into the challenge here, the immunity challenge, right? George really impressed me by sort of sticking in there a lot longer than what I expected. 4th place overall, not too bad when you're looking at who he's going up against here. And we know that towards the end of the season, it's going to become more and more endurance-based. Normally, it's an endurance-based challenge at the end of the season to be able to get to the final. Haley dropped out incredibly fast. And I don't know if that was a bit of a strategy because we do know that she's a bit of a challenge beast. But the other person here, obviously, that later on will be Medievac, who does well is Chelsea, being the last girl standing at 3rd place here in this challenge. And then ultimately, we're going to see a showdown between Emmett and Andrew. And Andrew really impressed me in this challenge. Someone we haven't heard a lot about, but there's sometimes you can see when people give up. And you can see when somebody's body just gives out on them. And I do think with Andrew, his body just gave out on him in the end in this challenge.
Yeah, certainly. He couldn't really hold in there towards the end. But yeah, George has really impressed me in this Unity Challenge, especially. He did really well. He finished first in the reward challenge as well to get that tasty cheeseburger to fill his belly there. But yeah, George is working really well in challenges, but Emmett is just a cut above everyone else at this stage. He really just hung in there. He reminded me a little bit of Alec Molino from Survivor David vs. Goliath, just the fact he was holding so strong in that challenge. And in the end, Andrew just he had those moments where he was pressing the ball up and down, and I think it just got a little bit too much for him. He seemed to lose his balance a little bit. He was on his tippy toes towards the end there, and there was no way he could survive, another couple of minutes like that, let alone another 15 minutes, half an hour, as Emmett probably would have been there for, because Emmett really wasn't flinching at all. But such an epic battle, and again, a classic challenge, but it really turned out to be quite entertaining towards the end to see who of those final three, Chelsea, Emmett, and Andrew, will come out on top.
No, 100%. And, at the end of the day, Emmett kind of on all three of these episodes, because obviously we can talk a little bit forward here, he's going to win 3 immunities in a row. He's going to put a massive target on his head moving forward because, he kind of bravely said, and I was kind of laughing at it when I heard the first episode of the week in episode 13, he said, I just want to win all of the immunities to the end, because Chappies for Survivor South Africa had a very similar thing that he said in the first episode, but he's been unable to win those immunities up until to date. But in Emmett's case, he's actually going to win these immunities, which is going to continue to add just a bigger and bigger threat on him. And he does seem to be playing a pretty good social game at this stage as well, Emmett, sharing the lollies and things like that with his own tribe mates, the Brawns that he's trying to keep together to vote here in the post-merge section of the game. But, Emmett winning all of these challenges, massive target on his back moving into the rest of the week. And I think that as soon as he starts losing a challenge here or there, some of his own alliance members are surely going to start looking at him as a potential threat that they need to take out rather sooner than later.
Yeah, well, at this point, Emmett is really the leader of that Brawn alliance. We saw him working with George to work out who they're going to pin the vote on in this first vote. Initially putting Andrew's name out there, but then I think eventually the target shifted to Laura being the new target. So it seems as though Emmett is really the head of the pyramid at the moment on that old Brawn's tribe. Obviously, he had a close alliance with Kaz and Gerald from that previous tribe, alongside George and Kara as well. And previously a part of that alliance with Simon, Danny, and Chelsea as well. So he has those strong connections with everyone. Even Flick, he seems close with. In fact, I'd say Flick almost seems like one of the closest members to him on this tribe, even though we hadn't really seen them working together beforehand. So I think Emmett's really in a strong position here. And everyone, at least at this stage of the game, where they are focusing on getting rid of the brains, seems to respect him and want to keep him in the game. But certainly, when it comes down to having eliminated a majority of the brains, and whether there be 1 or 2 left, it certainly may be time to cannibalize. And obviously, Emmett winning 3 straight immunity challenges, potentially 4 if he wins the next, or 5 or 6 or 7, however many he wins, it's really going to add up and create an even bigger target on him. So, I mean, I think at this stage it's too late to almost start throwing the immunity challenges and make yourself look more useless than you are. But certainly that target is really growing episode by episode every time he wins a challenge.
And listen, he's also not the most quiet person. He's quite vocal in the tribal councils. He always has something smart to say. He's just got that big personality, so he's not really hiding away. I think he has really only got one strategy at the moment, and that is to try and win as much as he can, up until a point where his alliance members needs him for votes and things like that. Otherwise, they might be overtaken. Like if he can get into the game long enough where he's a vote that his one vote counts for a lot, if that makes sense in an alliance, then maybe that is going to be a saving grace to try and get to the end of the game. You bring up a valid point here with Flick and Emmett being really close in the game. I noticed that as well, and I also noticed that Flick and Gerald was also very, very close, and Haley kind of notices that and tries to talk to Flick and Gerald together, potentially to work with her in the alliance that she's trying to form. But Flick says that it's too early for me to work with you now. I do still want to work with you. I just can't work with you right now. So I found it very interesting that little bit was given to us here in episode 13. I think it's going to have a bigger role to play down the line. And Haley, if she comes back from the game, which obviously it's hard not to talk about it immediately because that's really where we ended and that's the big talking point for the week. I think she's going to look for new alliance members, and I think that Flick could be one of those people that potentially might want to work with her. So maybe Emmett is someone that gets pulled in with that as well. And if Emmett is smart, he's going to know that he needs to align with other big threats, people that the rest of the team will want to take out, or because they want to win the game. So very interesting to see where that's going to go. But obviously the big strategy here in the first episode is going to be George playing double agent and playing between the two alliances and choosing his opportunity to talk to his old Brains tribe and to let them know where the vote is going to go, so that Haley ultimately can use the idol that she has to try and keep her numbers safe here. And it's one of the things that I do take my hat off. We'll talk about two things. Let's talk about Haley being willing to play that idol for her alliance. It's something I take my hat off for her, because a lot of players play selfish and they don't do it. I mean, Kez, when she notices that the idol was correctly played on the correct person, she doesn't stand up and try and play it for Danny, who she thought the votes was going to go on to, because they kept faking that Danny was going to be the person. So Haley being willing to save the rest of her alliance here, I think, is a really good thing. Would you agree? Oh, I might have lost Riley here on the live by the looks of it. Do I still have people here on the live feeds? I'm hoping that you guys can still hear me. But it's one of the things that I think is really interesting here for me personally, is the fact that Haley is willing to sacrifice her immunity idol. Even if she loses that, she's happy for the fact that she can keep her numbers strong, where I feel like a lot of other players, sometimes when you get it in the game, they're not willing to play their idol to save everybody, which I think is really, really important as well in the game. So be really interested to know what you guys think in the chat in regards to Haley being willing to sacrifice her idol to keep her alliance strong in the game and to have that numbers to move forward in the game. The second part of this that for me is really interesting is George playing this double agent, trying to work with the minority alliance and trying to get that minority alliance to sort of survive this round and take out one of the people that is going to be in the Brawn tribe. So Dale here is saying, yes, it makes sense. The first vote off the merch, you want to build and solidify those alliances 100%. I think that if you lose someone this early on, if Haley was to lose one of those people that she had there, who else does she have that really have voted with her long enough at this stage that would want to work with her? Plus, obviously, everybody knows that she's got an idol at this point as well. Like she kind of says in the tribal council, it's a public immunity idol. It's not a hidden immunity idol. And the best thing for her to do coming into this merge would definitely be ultimately to play it, get rid of it, try and minimize the threat that that would sort of bring to her having that idol as well. So just going through this here, Riley, welcome back. Lost you there for a second, but Dale kept me going. Dale was my co-host for the period when you were off air there. Just talking about Haley being willing to sacrifice her idol to keep her alliance strong, which is obviously a great move on her to try and keep numbers, because a lot of better players sometimes don't do that. And I sort of mentioned it was interesting because Kez had an idol as well, but even when Haley placed that idol correctly, Kez wasn't willing to do the same to try and keep her numbers safe and to try and keep Danny, who she thought the votes were going to go on to. So hats off to Haley for being willing to take a risk here, because it was a big risk. George could have blindsided her here and taken her out at this vote, but she trusted in him and tried to play that idol on Laura and successfully did so.
Yeah, absolutely. Haley making a great move here. And I do apologize. My internet just dropped out there. But yeah, Haley really working well to be able to sacrifice her idol to play for another member of her tribe. Obviously, Laura, we didn't really see them being too close on the original Brain tribe rather. But certainly to have that strong connection and to be willing to sacrifice your idol to play that for someone else, a massive move. I thought George as well, though, for letting the Brains tribe know and keeping his options open in the game. Obviously, there was a lot of conflict there later in the week, which we'll discuss later down the line. But on both sides, George, a great move to let the Brains tribe know what was going on. And for Haley, a great move to sacrifice her idol to play that for Laura and keep the Brains in the game and really create this massive blindside.
Yeah, so Anthony here says that he thinks George's play was a bit short-sighted. He doubts that the majority was going to think that Haley guessed correctly which player to play the idol on, and that they're now going to know that there's a mole. It's funny because only one person really sort of was glued onto it, and it's also one of the people that you would think would be a little bit more smart. She works with people in a correctional capacity where people try and lie to her on a daily basis. She kind of immediately picked up, hey, that's just too much of a coincidence here, that she knew exactly the right person to play the idol on when there were 5 potential options that she could play the idol on. And Emmett seems to just believe that she got lucky, and the rest of the alliance, we don't get to hear their opinions here, sadly. It seems like George kind of is going to get away with. And I do feel even towards the end here, when George was denying and deflecting, people didn't really fully trust Haley either at this stage, which was pretty crazy how he got away with it. But I think we'll go into that a little bit later on when we get to the next episode. One of the things I really wanted to talk about is Marcus's comment here, which is, and you can answer this and sort of talk to that a little bit, Riley. He says that it's quite funny that in a couple of days in both South Africa and Australia, we've had some controversy with idols and advantages being passed on after a player is voted out and before the torch is snuffed. I've got my opinion about that. I think I mentioned that in the South African podcast, and I'll bring that up again, but sort of interested to hear, what do you think about this? Because I do think it's a bit polarizing. Some people may like it and some people may not like it at all.
I am definitely in the I don't like it camp. Certainly, when you look at US Survivor, they have the legacy advantage, and that's, somewhere where you can will the idol to someone else. In this instance, though, you've already been voted out, and with an idol in your pocket, there is no reason in my mind why you should be able to give that to someone else after you've been voted out. I mean, the whole reason why Kez was voted out in the first place was to flush that idol and get it out of there, to make sure that there wasn't an idol in the game and there wasn't, that extra factor to contend with. Look, certainly I understand why the producers want to do that, to keep maybe a member in the bottom alliance still in the game. But I just think it's not really fair. Simon very well could have turned around and given those 2 idols to whoever, even though everyone voted against him last week. I just don't think there's a place for it in the game, really, unless there is a legitimate rule like a legacy advantage. I don't see why you should be able to gift an idol to someone else after you have been voted out. It's ridiculous to me.
It's interesting because I'm of the camp that, I don't mind it so much. And the reason I don't mind it so much is because I do still think that social game comes into play here. It's one thing to, it kind of can prevent that one person from going out there and finding an idol every single round to save themselves. This is a little bit different because you need social capital. You need to be able to be in goods with people. I mean, look at how close David and Luke was, in their first season when they played together. But yet David didn't want to give Luke his idol when he was voted out. He didn't seem to care that much about Luke's game, but clearly, if you look at someone like Kes, she cares about Flick's game to that point where she wants to keep Flick safe and she's happy to pass that idol on, which I found very interesting if you look at hindsight of that alliance and why did that not happen, because David could have done the exact same thing for Luke, so I do think social game comes into play, and we should look at that and say well done to Flick for creating such a strong bond with Kes, where Kes still wanted to keep Flick safe even at the point where she was voted out of the game. Another thing I want to bring up is that Leroux Botha said that this is something that is well known to the players, and Inesu, when I spoke to her, confirmed that it's a part of the rules of the game that you can do this before the torch is snuffed. So all the players know about it. So in my opinion, this is less of a bad thing compared to, listen, we vote someone out tonight and then suddenly you hear, okay, this person's not voted out, they're going to the other camp. Or, redemption comes into play and nobody knows when redemption's going to come into play, because you can sort of plan with that to a certain degree. And it sort of makes you think, well, in the future, should you have something where you pretend to be someone's friend, be close to them, and then vote them out and hope that they give it to you, kind of similar to what Sarah Lucina did with the legacy advantage, I keep forgetting her name. Game
Thomas.
Changers. There you go. So you know what I mean? So I feel like there's still some legitimacy in regards to you can strategize around it. Everybody's aware. I don't know if Australian Survivor, if they give the rules to the players in advance, but I do know for South Africa, they gave the rules to them in advance, saying that you can pass on an advantage or an idol. It's a part of the game before your torch is snuffed. So as long as everybody knows about it, I don't have a problem with it. But if people don't know about it, then it's a little bit unfair in my mind.
Well, I think we have seen an Australian Survivor before, have we not? I think in 2019, maybe 2018. I'm sure we've seen it at some point. So I certainly remember having this discussion in the past. I mean, excluding last week in Survivor South Africa. But look, in my mind, I just don't think there's a need for it. If you manage to blindside someone and get rid of their idol, I think that idol should go out of the game. Production can plant that back into the game at whatever point they want. But to me, it's just against the spirit of the game. If you can just get voted out and hand your idol down the chain of command, really, I just don't think it's all too fair, really, to be passing that down the line.
No, 100%. Guys, while you're in the chat here, let us know what you think about this advantage in the game. And if you think that being able to pass an idol onto someone or an advantage before your torch is snuffed, do you agree with that or are you against it? It'll be interesting to see what the live viewers think of that. And if they're a fan or not a fan of it, I do think it's probably going to be a lot 50-50. And maybe I'm going to be in the minority of people who don't care so much about it. Like I said, if it's in the rules and if it's clearly explained, I'm better with that than some of the twists that we sometimes have where people don't know about it in advance. Okay, so let's move on here to the second episode of the week, and we'll give a few people an opportunity to bring their opinions in, and then we'll let you know what the consensus is with the people that are watching live. So far, it looks like most people are agreeing with you on this, Riley. So we go into the second episode, and we find out that Kara and George are still pretty close to Baden. And Baden is someone that they still want to work with. We didn't see much of it within this first episode, but Emmett is onto it. He is noticing that there's a lot of conversations happening with Baden, and Emmett sort of is driving the strategy towards wanting to vote out Baden when Danny is really focused on Haley, really wanting to get Haley out of the game because of this betrayal that happened and also the fact that she's played the idol correctly. She's now seen as a threat, someone that's very good at the game. But hats off to Emmett here for noticing this, because what he's effectively trying to do, right, is he's trying to remove any options within that Brains tribe, because he knows that there's a limited few people that George and Kara actually gets along with within that Brains tribe, because the Brains have already voted Kara out, and George has been on the outs for such a long time in the game that there's not many people he really wants to work with. So he's removing options here.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great move by Emmett to have that ability to look at the game and figure out, what's going to cause more problems for us down the line. Obviously, Haley has proven to be, in my opinion, the best player so far this season, despite her being voted out in this week, but obviously returning in Redemption Island. But to that end, I think for Emmett to recognize that Baden is someone that has that relationship with Kara and George from the previous Brains tribe, and is someone that could potentially be the leak, the mole in this instance, who's working to feed that back to the others, being Haley, Laura, and Andrew. It's certainly a smart decision for Emmett to recognize that and to say, well, look, we can get Haley out at another time, but at this very point, we want to minimize the chance of Kara and George flipping on us and going back to the Brains. So if there's any bridge there, we need to burn that immediately, so we make sure that Kara and George are on our side, and they have no other option really than to work with us. So certainly to target Baden and recognizing him as being a threat because of his ability to work with all the former Brains tribe, whereas some of the other former Brains have really isolated George for reasons which we saw in the pre-merge there. I certainly think it is a very smart decision by Emmett there to really put that emphasis on Baden and tell Danny we can get her out later. Let's just go for this guy now. It's going to work out best for us down the track.
Okay, so we've had an opportunity here. There's been a few people that have come in. We've had about 3 responses here, all of them so far agreeing with you, Riley, that they hate it. It would be interesting for anybody watching this video at a later stage. Leave in the comments what you think about it. Do you hate it? Do you agree with Riley and the live audience here? The fact that you can provide an idol or give it on to someone else. I want to talk about something I really hated, probably the thing I hated the most in this episode. If we had to look at the 3 different controversial things that happened this week, and this is the fact that in this specific immunity challenge, we're going to have 3 immunities. 3 people will win individual immunity, which is nothing new. We've seen it happen in Survivor South Africa, Island of Secrets. At first glance, when he said 3 people will win immunity, I thought to myself, brilliant, no issues. There's enough players left in the game. That's okay. They can work around it. It will muddy the water somewhat. But then he drops the mother of all bombs on the cast, and he says that these 3 people will be able to vote in the tribal council, and no one else will be able to vote. Horrible twist in the game. When I saw this, I don't want to, anybody, if there's players that are playing this season that are watching the podcast, I know you guys sometimes watch the show, please don't take offense to it. It's nothing to do with you guys playing the game, and you have to play within the rules of what's happening on the show. We understand that. But for us as viewers, saying that 3 people, will have all the power in the game to vote, I just thought this was a horrible twist, and it breaks the game. It breaks the social strategy that goes into a game, a social experiment such as Survivor. in my opinion.
Yeah, of course. And in the end, I mean, there wasn't even 3 people eligible to vote. It ended up being 1 person that was able to vote. The producers on this season really just throwing so many twists at the wall. It seems as though Jonathan LaPaglia is almost turning into Julie Chen. The amount of times that he said, expect the unexpected this week. Really, again, like George saying his career in politics and how he's the king. Again, if you were playing a drinking game, you would be out cold. Just with the amount of times JLP said expect the unexpected this week. But I mean, I liked the idea of having the people who had immunity fight it out for fire. I thought that was an interesting twist. But certainly, it seemed like it was a very retroactive move, because at the challenge he said only 3 people are going to be able to vote. Then he changed his tack completely at Tribal Council and said they have to fight in fire, and the winner is the only person that can cast a vote. With Redemption Rock, I suppose it makes sense there, and Baden isn't completely screwed by this twist. But yeah, I certainly think it's not the greatest twist to be putting in this early in the merge. I don't think. Maybe for a pre-merge twist to have like we saw a couple of weeks ago with 4 people having immunity and then them casting the deciding vote, something like that maybe, and creating a general consensus in the pre-merge. But when it comes to this, I mean, the first vote was clouded by Kaz giving up her idol to Flick after being voted out. This second vote was clouded by Redemption Rock and this fire-making twist, 3 people get immunity, only 3 people can vote. And again, the third Tribal Council as well, plagued by Redemption Rock again. So much controversy this week, so many new twists in the game.
I tell you what, Riley. I tell you what, I'm looking forward to Survivor US to see a normal season of Survivor. I never thought in a million years, I will say that. But Jeff Probst, you're starting to look better and better by the day, because, he's done some crazy stuff over the last couple of seasons. Survivor US has had a lot of twists and messing with the sort of core of the game and how it's played out. But Survivor US is starting to look vanilla compared to what Australian Survivor has done this season, especially in these last couple of episodes with how they've played around with it. Because, you're giving them even a little bit too much credit in regards to the fire challenge that they had to do and then see who wins fire, because in my mind that makes it even worse. It's bad enough that 3 people are going to vote, but now 1 person has all the vote. 1 person, has there ever in the history of Survivor been 1 person more powerful than Danny was in this last episode, where she got to place the sole vote on who was going to go home? Luckily it didn't change anything, because Emmett and Danny were going to vote for Baden in any case. But I just think it's ridiculous to have 1 player give them that much power to decide who's going to go home. And absolutely hated this. The rest of the people that went there for Tribal Council were just passengers. And if I was one of those people that had my tinfoil hat on, there's a lot of, you know me long enough, Riley, that I don't believe in the conspiracy theories. I don't believe that a game is set up for certain people to get more idols or to get them to a win. But if I had my tinfoil hat on this round, I would have said they love Hayley, like all of us. Like I like Hayley as well. The fact that she's gone to Redemption Island, I still like Hayley, right? But I feel like they might have looked at that and said, oh crap, we've got 2 old Brawn's tribe here in the top 3. There was going to be 3 people to vote. They would have been hearing the whole day Danny and Emmett. They would have been talking to the producer saying, we're voting Hayley, and they were thinking to themselves, how do we change this? Because even at Tribal Council, all of the people, and this is why I said I hate these rules more, because these rules seem like it's being made up on the spot instead of a rule book being given to the players that's easy to follow, to say, these are the rules that you're playing by. You can pass your idol on before your torch is snuffed. That's easy because you can understand it. But now they're changing it. They said 3 people get to vote. You get to Tribal Council. No, it's not 3 people anymore. It's 1. Plus, we're going to make it a fire-making challenge. And then immediately JLP goes to Andrew and he says, hey, Andrew, you're a survival expert. You're great at making fire. Do you think you'll get this? I think that they thought Andrew would win this. And Andrew would turn the tables to save someone like a Hayley or a Baden in this situation, help that minority alliance out. I think that they tried, like someone said in the chat earlier, they're trying to be the extra player in the game that we just don't need at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Australian Survivor in the past, it's renowned almost for its amount of non-elimination twists. So I think if you're going to play Australian Survivor, you kind of have to expect it. But I think especially with this fire-making twist, it did seem to change from the challenge to Tribal Council. I'm a little bit suspect on that. Again, I don't like... I don't like being too much of a conspiracy theorist, but it did seem like the whole notion of how the Tribal Council would play out changed by the time they got back to camp, and they almost added that fire-making twist on top of it to create even more speculation. But yeah, look, I think having the fire-making challenge, I'm kind of in the camp of liking it. I just would prefer to know about it beforehand. But yeah, again, having the power split between 3 or even 1 person deciding the vote, it is a little bit unfair, because really at the end of the day, they can send anyone home. It almost was a missed opportunity for Danny not to send home a massive wild card like Haley or a George. Again, I know that Emmett certainly told her to err on the side of caution and get rid of Baden at that point. But certainly, if Andrew had gotten into power and taken out someone like an Emmett or a George, it really would have sent shockwaves through the game. And I think that's what production wanted from this twist ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. They try to get involved. And Anthony here says that he believes that this has forced Haley's hand in this round. And we'll talk about, because that's the next talking point I want to go into, Haley throwing George under the bus, and that potentially having so little control over the vote, not being able to vote. I can understand why Haley went down that road. But one of the things I wanted to address, we had a question here in the chat, if I can find it, where Jenny has asked, hello Jenny, welcome to the stream, always nice to have you here. Production have come up with a new non-elimination episode now, do Telsey's Medivac. Actually, it was the wrong one. It was one where it was asked, how would we deal with the non-elimination twist if we were the producers in the game? And for me personally, yeah, Marcus is the one who asked it there, Riley, thanks. So for me personally, and I'd like to hear your opinion about this, Riley, but for me personally, I feel like, why don't we just add more players to the game? It's 50 days. Let's do 26 or 28 players. However many players you want to put into the game, put it into the game. Yes, Jenny, great minds think alike, because at the end of the day, we're only going to really get to know 4 or 5 people in Australian Survivor the way that they've edited the show this season, right? So just do more players. Let a more authentic game play out. I don't want to see players not being eliminated, getting back into the game and winning it. The real fans of the show, the real fans of Survivor that have been following it for 20 years or for as long as they have, they're not going to enjoy it, and it's going to be a hollow win if Haley gets to the end and she wins it. Don't talk about that right now, because I want to finish off with the Haley conversation at the end. But how would you fix the non-elimination show?
Yeah, I think certainly expanding the cast is probably the easiest way to do it. And I believe Big Brother Australia even has a similar size to that, 26. So I'm not sure how true that is. But certainly, adding more players is one way to do it. I do think, though, the way that Endemol Shine and Network 10 like to structure Australian Survivor, they like these non-elimination twists because they create more casual audience coming in. So I understand why they do it, but it does ruin the integrity of the game, which is really annoying. I know it's not a popular twist, but I've always said that Australian Survivor's best option for a non-elimination twist is probably Edge of Extinction. Certainly something that hasn't been popular in the past, but having a known quantity from day one, knowing that there's an Edge of Extinction or a Redemption Island twist that has a little bit of authenticity to it, but still gives those players a second chance, adds a couple more eliminations to the mix, and even adds another challenge to the mix each episode. I think it's something that that would work well. Although I know with Australian Survivor and the amount of money that have gone into production, I'm not sure they can really sustain having a third island 100% of the time. Look, I think I'm disappointed that they didn't come up with more non-elimination twists that were more legitimate in this long off season between All Stars and Brains vs Brawn. They had about a year there to nut things out. Look, as I said, expanding the cast is the easiest way to do it, I think. But Endemol Shine, I'm not sure how keen they are on having those extra twists in the game. So look, it really is a catch-22. As I've said in the past, I think with Australian Survivor, you have to expect the unexpected. As unfortunate as it is to have these controversial twists, it's something we've seen time and time again, whether it be from the very beginning in 2016, all the way through 2017, Tara came back from Redemption Island and ended up at Final Tribal Council. 2018, we had Deadman walk-in. 2019, we had that tribe swap where Sean was voted to the other tribe. We have so many non-elimination twists. It's a known quantity at this point, but yeah, I think to make it more legitimate, to make it more transparent, we certainly need to have that authenticity. And JLP needs to be saying only one person will be voting at Tribal Council tonight. The person that goes home is going to Redemption Rock, where they'll compete against the next person voted out to return to the game. Adding that authenticity will make it a little bit better, I think. Although, again, I don't think they can please everyone.
Yeah, so Anthony, I see your comment here saying that they can't even edit the 24 players they have now. So how will they edit them if they had more players in the game? And I asked you, sir, what would you rather want? Would you rather have these non-eliminations, or would you rather have 3 or 4 more purple edits in the show? I personally, it sucks to be the player that goes out there and that doesn't get an edit. But me personally, I would much rather have more players to have non-eliminations, even if I don't get to know if there's a couple more Sammys this season, then so be it. It's always heartbreaking to see someone go. I mean, Chelsea was another person this season that just, and we'll talk about her in a few minutes, but she just didn't really have much of an edit. Also, one of the things here that Marcus says, he says, when will producers learn to trust their cast? Like Chris said, say what you want about Probst, but at least he still cares about the integrity of Survivor. I think Probst really, like, he lives and breathes Survivor, and he's constantly, whenever he brings a twist in, he legitimately thinks that it's going to make the show better. I don't have the same faith that the producers in Survivor, in Australian Survivor, does it for the same reasons and to make the show better sometimes. I feel like there really are, there's probably some corporates above them that says, hey, you need to have this many episodes, or you're limited to this budget, and they kind of been to it. If it means that we're still getting Australian Survivor, with a very, very heavy heart, I'll accept it. But it's not going to be the best franchise out there if they're going to do these things. Another thing that I thought was really interesting, and Sammy, welcome to the live stream. I haven't seen you in the live stream before. We love having the live audience involved in this conversations. Sammy says, if the winners lose their vote, the dilemma between having immunity and losing a vote would have led to a way better strategy talk. And I actually agree with that. Do you agree with that, Riley? What happens if the 3 people who wins don't have a vote? Because suddenly you've got to think to yourself, is the immunity worth more than throwing an immunity and having the votes within your alliance, because the numbers are still that close? That would have been a way smarter twist to bring into an episode like this.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't have minded even to see a staggered challenge. So people that wanted to fight for immunity could fight for immunity, but if they fight for immunity, they lose their vote. If people want to keep their vote at the next tribal council, they can do another challenge, say. But I certainly think adding that sort of balance where, if you win immunity, or you go for this certain option, you lose your vote, it adds consequence. And it does add really a different factor to the game. I would have liked to have seen something like that, whereby, you really shake up the game. You have some people safe, but they can't vote. And the people that are vulnerable are the ones that ultimately decide who goes home. It adds a more, as Sammy says there, more strategy talk to the game. It has people weigh up, do I go for immunity or do I want to keep my vote? Similar to Survivor South Africa's twist this season with Immunity Island, players have the opportunity to play for an advantage. If they play for the advantage, they lose their vote at the next tribal council. So having that sort of ultimatum and having players in the game decide what they want to do they want to, stay safe at this tribal council, or do they want to keep their vote and stay loyal to their alliance? It adds, more options and, again, more strategy discussion as well.
So Marcus here says, should we just have Lurubuta take over the show as well for Australian Survivor? For me personally, as a fan of Survivor South Africa and Australian Survivor, I wouldn't be opposed to Lurubuta doing both shows. No offense to whoever's running it at the moment. I know there's a new producer that's only taken over this season, and I would love to give her an opportunity to lift the game. But Lurubuta is one of us. He's a fan like us. He understands what people love to see on the show. But he would have to deal with the different demands of a show that is on Channel 10. Like I said, I think that some of these restrictions that are being put on the producers are probably being put on them at a higher level than them themselves, and they've kind of got to play by this. Thursday Night Outcasts, welcome to the live stream. For those who are not aware, I'm sure most people are, Thursday Night Outcasts also has their own podcast where they cover Survivor South Africa. So if you haven't checked that out before, go and check them out. They're really, really good at what they do as well. And they ask, this season, Survivor Australia versus Survivor SA, what would you prefer? I mean, I've got my opinions about this. Riley, you've been on the show before saying that Survivor South Africa is probably your favorite franchise out of the 3 franchises. Do you still feel that way based on this season?
Yeah, it's my favorite out of the international versions. US Survival will always be number 1 for me. But certainly, Survivor South Africa has that old school feel, that level of authenticity as well, which Australian Survivor is really missing this season, with the amount of stuff that's been thrown at the wall, all the way dating back to the first tribal council, where George had the power to keep half the tribal council safe and take them back to camp with him. I certainly think this season, Survivor South Africa has definitely been the stronger version than Australian Survivor. Although I will say that the thing that brings Australian Survivor this season down is the twists, the amount of non-elimination twists. Every week we're getting, 2 or 3
Yes.
twists that really shake up
And
the
too many
game.
idols.
And way
idols.
too many idols and advantages, and in very suspect places as well. So look, I certainly think there needs to be that almost leveling out of the fairness of the game. But again, look, Australian Survivor has its constraints. I understand why these twists are being thrown in to keep, the casual fans coming back, to have those ads to play during the week, like Sue's big move or whatever it is, to bring those new fans to the show and keep that audience. But yeah, it does delegitimize the game a little bit when every episode it's really almost down to luck at this point. And there's, no matter how good a game you play, like Haley, I mean, yeah, she got tangled in that little debacle with George there, but you can play such a strong game, but there's one twist completely throws you under the bus. And in this instance, Haley really had to scramble for her life, and had to throw George under the bus to make sure that she was kept in the game, and ultimately she remained safe. And in the end, down the track, it's ended up setting her home, or at least a redemption rock. So these twists can really ruin people's otherwise perfect games.
100%. So I just really quickly want to add my own opinion about the 2 seasons. I do think this season of Survivor South Africa has been stronger with the 2 seasons. But when you look at Australian Survivor as a whole, they've got amazing, amazing characters that we've seen over the years. So if you look at the franchise as a whole, I think Australian Survivor has had a more solid franchise over all of the seasons so far than Survivor South Africa. But I think that Survivor South Africa in recent times, as much as the last 3 seasons, have just improved each year so much, and just gotten better and better, that if Australian Survivor doesn't watch out, Survivor South Africa could have the superior product, between the two. I'm hoping that Australian Survivor takes some feedback on. I'm hoping somebody from the producers that probably won't listen to a small podcast like ours or other podcasts that are out there, but I hope that the bigger podcasts, that sadly I couldn't listen to so far this year because you don't want to get your own opinions messed up with what they've got, their opinions on their podcast. But I'm hoping that they're listening to some of these podcasts and that people are telling them, like, listen, some of these twists, the way that you're shaking up the game isn't something that we really want to see on the show. Anthony says the only twist that I will tolerate at this point in the season is Queen Shani entering as a surprise contestant. We all love Shani. So, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to say. Like, the characters that we get on Australian Survivor in general is just so great, and this season already has great characters, but it's been muddied by the twists, because the twists and everything, I think we've gone on a bit of a rant here, has kind of overpowered the characters a little bit. So I do want to move on to the next episode here, Riley. With Chelsea being medevac, we hear that she's going to get 24 hours again out of the game to be able to get herself back in. But because of that, she was going to miss the tribal council. She wouldn't be in tribal council for the evening, and she was struggling with dehydration. And at the end of the episode, we hear that she completely lost her balance and was unable to get into the game as well. Do you have a bit of a eulogy for Chelsea's game? Because she was one of those people that we just didn't get to know this season, I feel like, that much at all. Apart from she had that phone call where she got to talk to her boyfriend.
Yeah, we certainly saw a lot of personal content from her. Really, what flashes back to me is Haley absolutely manhandling her in that second reward challenge, where they were trying to get the sack from one square to the other. But certainly for Chelsea, she made that big move and took out her biggest ally in the game. But yeah, really, she just seemed to be one of the Brawn's numbers. We didn't get to see too much from her, unfortunately. Certainly a strong challenge beast. We saw her really fight in that first immunity challenge. But yeah, to see her go, obviously Danny losing her left-hand woman in this instance, really unfortunate that she goes out in those circumstances, because obviously we always like to see people go out by, ultimately playing the wrong game and being voted out. So yeah, for Chelsea to go home in those circumstances, unfortunate, but a great contestant the whole time, and I really wish we could have seen more from her.
So Dale here says that my favorite thing is that JLP seems to be over those twists. Like with his tweets, he just seems to care as much as we do, but he got to make them coins during the pandemic. And that is also, Marcus also says the same thing here, that in the preseason on RAP, he said that he hated the non-eliminations and would rather have them gone. Even his tweets this week were throwing shade at production. It is a shame when you've got people like that on the show who really care about the show, and they kind of have to just roll with the punches, because I do think, to agree here with one of the comments that are being made, that Survivor AU knows how to build people's story arcs and focuses heavily on the character, where Survivor, I'm assuming SA, showcases gameplay over character moments. And I agree with that. There's definitely Survivor South Africa, you see the main plan, you see the counter plan, and Survivor AU, you really get to know the characters. I just feel like, Dale, this season they've been off because they've just focused so much on only a few characters that by the end of this episode, Riley, we're going to explore who do we think are going to be the main contenders at this stage, still to win the game. And I think that it's limited to maybe 3 or 4 people at this stage. I don't know if you've got a hot take and think there's more than that can potentially win the show.
Yeah, certainly I'm still on Team Queen Hayley's side, and we will discuss that later in the game. But yeah, look, we've seen so much from George, Simon, Emmett, and Hayley almost seem to be the 4 players we've seen the most from. Obviously, we've lost Simon at this point. So really, those 3, we're just getting so much content from them. And others like Gerald this week didn't get much content. Flick has sort of fallen away as well. So look, we're seeing so few characters are getting the focus. And I understand, that they want to promote these big characters as they sort of all-stars, these pillars of the game, and to have them for the future of the show. But certainly it does cloud it when you get a contestant like someone like Chelsea, who gets, not much at all, despite being a game player. Sam Shaw's in 2019, again, a great example of that. No confessionals for her. So yeah, it's unfortunate that we don't get to see these players really fleshed out all that much.
Now, because of the twist, Hayley's hand was forced in the previous round, and she outed George in that round to say that he's playing a bit of a double agent, messing up a perfect double agent game. I thought George was playing the game really well up until this point, trying to maneuver between the 2 alliances. Kara and George early talking about the fact that they probably need to get rid of another brain, just to make sure that the numbers continue to stay in a way where they would consistently need Kara and George in that middle to jump back and forth. I did find it really funny when George said that he goes to Kara for his counsel and that she's got very good strategic mind, when she kind of messed up the votes earlier on, and she's already incorrectly played an idol, which sent her home previously as well. But we don't get to see a lot of his strategic talk with George, sadly, at this point. The main thing that happens here is that Hayley spots an opportunity with George coming to them, telling them who's got Kez's idol. George still thinks his whole double agent thing is intact and that he doesn't have to worry about anything. And he tells them that Kez has got the idol. She got given the idol by, Kez gave the idol to Flick, and Flick has been given the idol by Kez in the previous tribal council. And Hayley uses this opportunity to use information to her advantage and to go over to the people on the other side in the Brawn's tribe to say, hey, you've got some double agents, you've got people that are providing me with information. And she holds on to this crucial bit of information of knowing where the idol is until tribal council, which I found really interesting. And when she brings it up at tribal council, we find out that Danny wasn't even aware of this. So it's very interesting that there was only a few people that were aware of Flick potentially having this idol. I wonder if there were other people in the alliance that knew about it, but Danny clearly seems to be on the outs. And without Chelsea there, she seems to not have anybody to go to. Could we potentially even see a Danny and Hayley team up again now that Hayley's back in the game?
Yeah, well, certainly. I think the ultimately the impetus that sent Hayley home was the fact that George was in the Brawn's alliance and they weren't going to go against him, despite what Hayley said at that point. Let's just pick off the brains and we can get rid of George later down the line. They're almost going to be more trusting of George than they are of Hayley, because Hayley's obviously not in their alliance. Certainly, Hayley worked very well in the previous episode to really appease to Danny and Emmett, ultimately send in Baden to Redemption Rock. But in this episode, really, I think George and Hayley were pitted against each other. It was one of those guys that were going to go home, because really it was, the heat was just bubbling up to the surface, and it came down to those two. And George obviously lobbying to the likes of Andrew and Laura, getting them to switch sides and take out Hayley for being someone that's leaking information and throwing him under the bus. Certainly, he's the one with the power in the tribe. He has the trust or the faith, at least, from his Brawn alliance. So certainly a great play from him. But I do think, especially now with Hayley coming back into the game, and even members like Way at Tribal Council clip in that, George is actually not telling the truth. I stand with Hayley on that instance. It really might put a fire under George's belly. And I think it's going to maybe, and we've been saying this the whole time, the downfall of George is coming. But I think in this instance, we're really going to see the downfall of George for being caught out on that lie and really avoiding the question all this long. It's going to catch up to him.
Yeah, and also the worst possible scenario for him here is Haley coming back into the game. Haley is the person who knows the truth, who tried to put it on blast right there in the tribal council, but ultimately were the person that took the hit and didn't make it. I think that there's a few people that are going to want to work with Haley, and Haley also says on Redemption Rock that she thinks that she needs to work with some of the Brawns to be able to get deeper into the game. The Brains all turned their back on her. She got voted out unanimously in this vote. No one stood by her towards the end here. So it's very interesting to see someone unanimously getting voted out that are potentially now coming back in the game and will still have an opportunity to win the game here and would still, I think, is smart enough to work a way out of the bottom. But I feel like this twist of Redemption Rock is going to cost George his game more than anything else because, it would have been one thing if Haley was voted out and he didn't have to work on that lie that he's previously told and continue to defend the criticism that Haley is going to bring to him. But now that hasn't gone away with Haley coming back into the game. So pretty much a reset of this week. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how things are going to go forward. I do want to just catch up on a couple of the live comments here. So Thursday Night Outcast asked if I would ever apply for Survivor South Africa. I have only once applied for Survivor with Survivor New Zealand season 1. I got pretty deep into the casting process. New Zealand doesn't exist anymore. So I do have dual citizenship, South Africa and New Zealand. So I would never count anything out. Would have to see how things go. And we also have here that Gerald hasn't had a confessional for like 6 or 7 episodes. And I think Dale is saying here that the last time he had a confessional was when Kara was still in the Brawn's tribe. So really, really strange editing in regards to that. So really, really funny. To see how they're doing the show. Now, Haley's voted out at the spot here, Riley. Let's get back to the main question we all want to ask here because she has played a very, very good and interesting game up until this point. Let's say Haley does do the impossible here and she still finds a way to get to the end of the show. How will this win be in your mind? I know there's a lot of support for Haley here in the chat, a lot of people who really like her, but, if we look at this, can we judge her against, because some people said she might be, like I might have even said that she would be a better winner than the Golden God himself if she runs all the way to the end with the display that she's had up until this point. How will she stack up? And like we're playing a very big hypothetical here, but if she gets to the end from here and she wins it, we don't know. I mean, she could still do some very amazing things, but how would you rate her as a winner if she comes back and wins the show? Because to me, the editor's still telling me she's winning.
Yeah, well, certainly. I think I'm a little bit biased in this sense, since I have been, Haley's been my winner pick since day 0, since preseason. Obviously my first pick in the draft there. Look, I think it is a massive asterisk against her for having that Redemption Rock twist. Certainly, look, I'm one of the people that actually acknowledges that Chris Underwood played a great game in Survivor Edge of Extinction, mainly because Edge of Extinction was a known quantity. To that end, though, I think with Haley being voted out and coming back into the game, it does knock her a little bit. But I think that the performance she's played so far in the game, she's dominated this whole pre-merge stage. This first, how many days are we in now? 30-odd days. She's really been the most dominant player. It really has only been this last tribal council that she really ate her own words and got screwed over there by George. Certainly, if she comes back into the game with a vengeance and plays a strong game from here on out, I can't see any reason why she doesn't win the game. I mean, at this stage, Haley and George are really the only people, and Emmett actually, are probably the only people in my mind that are actually playing a really good game, a winner's tier game. Certainly, they're the only ones we've seen in the edit anyway, so who's to know how all the other players are playing at this point. But Haley's played a really good game to this point, and certainly if she can continue that strength towards the end, I don't see why you can't, legitimize her as a winner.
Now, Anthony, really appreciate you saying here that if I was ever to be on Survivor, it would be iconic. And I want to run this by the live chat and also by Riley. If I was ever to play the show, I think if I'm in confessionals, I'll just call myself Mr. Worldwide. How do you think that will go down?
I can't see you getting past episode 1, to be honest, Chris. I think going to be another Jacob Dell and a flame out on episode 1. But you know what? Best of luck to you. We'll see how you go. LaRue, if you're watching, give Chris a call. You've got his number. So look, it would be entertaining to see, a Survivor Worldwide alum.
Yeah, just give me a call, and Mr. Worldwide will be on his way to play in the next season. I do think it would be a lot of fun. I would probably have a massive target for the 200 viewers that we have. Hopefully 70% of them are from the US. So for the 10 or 12 people from South Africa that watch the show, I might be in trouble if I was to go out and play the game. Also here, A Loyal is saying Haley is the best of the best, not only for this season but of all Australian Survivor seasons. So next episode, she should be the one that should be voted out. Even a child could see this, Riley. Do we think that the players will be smart enough to take Haley out when she comes back? I don't think so. I think Haley is going to work her way back in. But I do agree. Haley is playing a really, really good game at the moment. And I'll say she is Pia and David combined. So very high praise here for Haley. She's got a lot of love online. I do think she's a great player. I think for me personally, if she was to come back, Riley, and win this game, she would probably be, she is already one of the better players we've ever seen in Australian Survivor, and she will remain to be one of the better players that we've ever seen in Survivor. But for me, she'll always have an asterisk next to her name if she was to win the season after being voted out. And I would only be able to compare her to Chris Underwood and Vanessa Marawa as the only other two winners that I know that have ever been voted out of the game and that have come back to win the show. And if you look at Vanessa Marawa and also at Chris Underwood, she may be the better one of the three of them. Because that's
I think Guy Leach as well from the first Australian Celebrity Survivor was also voted out and went on to win. Okay. So it's certainly something we haven't seen in the past. Even Australian Survivor 2017, Tara Pitt was voted out of the game, made it all the way to the final tribal council. I basically gave it away already. Jericho beat her at final tribal council there. So look, I certainly think it does legitimize her game a little bit. But the strength of her game so far has been so dominant. As A. says in the chat there, she really is a Pia and David combined into one. And as Jenny brings up here in the chat, if Haley wins, she goes in the Australian Survivor Mount Rushmore for sure with David, Luke, and one other player. I might say Shawnee is potentially on the Survivor Mount Rushmore. Maybe that's a bit biased. Pia as well, a great winner. And that's certainly something we'll discuss in the off-season about who goes on the Australian Survivor Mount Rushmore. But Haley playing such a dominant game so far. And I'm loving her in confessionals as well. She's a great narrator for the show as well.
So just so we're clear here, to be on Mount Rushmore, in my mind, you don't need to be a winner. And I can judge you as a player and as a winner separately. So everybody in the chat that's coming at me saying it's treason, Chris, not to love Haley as a winner, I don't need to be high on her as being one of the best winners to be high on her as a player, because I can differentiate between the two, So I think Haley is a great player of the franchise, and I would personally rather have her not win so we could get her back on another All-Star season or an international crossover season or something like that. But I'll also be happy for her not. I won't be going at her saying, you're a horrible person for winning the show based on the rules the production has put out there for you, like a lot of people went at Chris Underwood. At the end of the day, she's got to play to the rules that are set in front of her, and I will support her win regardless. But I will have to look at her win as a separate bracket, because it's a different game to the one that Jericho, Kirsty, Shangold and Pia and David had to play. It's a different game with a different set. Well, I guess they all played a game where they all could have gotten voted out and came back. For a lot of them, there was redemption in place, but she won with a redemption, extra life, whatever you want to call it, within the game. So you got to look at that somewhat differently. Another thing I want to bring up is you do realize, Riley, that Emmett is 2 immunities short of equaling Brooke's record. And we've still got so many players in the game. We could have a new challenge beast and a new individual immunity king in the game. He could overtake Brooke here in the next 2 episodes. I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, absolutely. I was crunching the numbers while watching the last episode. 5 wins is the record for individual immunity challenges. Brooke being the only one to do it in Australian Survivor. There are a couple of other names on the list from the US. Colby Donaldson, Terry Dietz, Ozzy Lust. Mark Holloway did it in Worlds Apart. Tom Westman in Palau. Brad Culpepper in Game Changers. From Survivor South Africa, there's Ashley from Season 3. Rob Bantele from Season 7, and from New Zealand Season 1, Nicaragua, there was Tom. So he would be joining esteemed company there. Obviously some great winners in that mix in Mike and Tom, but Emmett is really dominating the game so far. I wouldn't be surprised if he reaches that 6th individual immunity win, which would make him the greatest of all time. At least English speaking Survivor. I'm not sure of the stats in other versions of the show like Russian or Romanian or Spanish. But certainly, he's really dominating the game so far.
Yeah.
And I'd almost go as far to say that he's really creeping up my power rankings at this point. He's playing such a great social game that I certainly think if he can keep a strong core alliance around him, he has the potential to go far in the game. My worry for Emmett, as we've said in the past, if he keeps winning immunity challenges, that could put a massive target on his back. And it's certainly something he doesn't want in the game, but certainly he's got to keep on winning those challenges from here on out, not only to become a legend, but to keep his place in the game as well.
Well, he'll have to get past Dale first. He says that the fandom will decide who the challenge beats of Survivor AU. And at the moment, it is Queen Brooke. So, big fan of Brooke as well. So, for me, I give credit where it's due. If he does get the record, you got to take your hat off to him. There's not many people that have won 5 immunities worldwide as well. Hayley is the luckier version of Phoebe at this point, because that's a great point. Phoebe was a great player. The one thing I do think Hayley's got on Phoebe is I do think Hayley, she's got a lot of immunity wins in her towards the end of this season. I think we could see some immunity wins from her. She's proven herself to be pretty good at those challenges as well. Now, Riley, you sort of mentioned power rankings there, and it's a good time to segue into who we've still got left in our teams at this point. I came into this episode with one person down, and I will continue to remain one person down after this week as well, as I lose Kez here in the early stages of the week, and you ended up losing Baden as well,
and you lose Chelsea as well.
Yeah, and I lose Chelsea as well. I forgot, due to Medivac. So I'm really in trouble this season. I have Danny, George, Emmett, and Way. And Way we haven't heard of for such a long time. I think she did say one confessional at the merge, but I really don't have much hope for her. And I think this is a good time to go into who we think will be the players at the moment to watch out for and who's going to win the game, and who do we think is in the best position. Now, who's in the best position and who's going to win the game is actually two different things. So maybe we look at who's currently in the best position in the game. Let's have our top 3 of that, and then let's have a look and see if that kind of correlates with who we think is going to win the show based on the edit that we have seen at this point in the game. Now, I'm going to go this way because I do believe this person is leading his tribe, but I can also see how we might get a blind spot edit at this point where we just don't see anybody talking about taking him out because he's been winning so many immunities. But you've got to put Emmett probably in there in the top 3 somewhere. I'm going to have him as my number 1 for leading the Brawn tribe at this stage and winning a lot of immunities. He's really been driving a lot of the strategy in regards to where they were voting this week. So you've got to look at him and say he's in a pretty solid position here to take the game out and win it. And then in second place, it's a bit of a toss-up between 2 players for me here, but I'm probably going to go with Flick at this stage just because of that conversation that she had with Hayley earlier in the week to say she's willing to work with her a little bit later in the game. And we also know she's quite close to Gerald, so she's got him there in her back pocket. Plus, on the other back pocket, if she had a left pocket, she's got Gerald on her right pocket. She's got her idol, which she can still play as well, which gives her a lot of power in the game. And then third, I will still put Danny in there, even though she didn't know about the idol. She is still in that my majority alliance for my power rankings of who I think is currently in the best position to play the game and win the game, not necessarily the edit that I'm seeing in front of me. Who do you think is in your sort of top 3 for the edit, not the edit, for the power rankings and where they are in the game currently? And then after that, we'll close off with who do we think, based on the edit, is probably going to go all the way and win this.
Yeah, well, last week I was sort of saying that I think Hayley, Baden, and Flick were going to be the final 3. Obviously, Baden has gone home in this instance. And look, I was honestly surprised that Flick didn't side with Hayley. I thought Hayley might have created a strong alliance with Flick. So I'm a bit surprised she worked with Danny in that instance. If we're purely talking about who's in the best position in the game at the moment, I think George has had a great week of gameplay, but it's really going to catch up to him this next week. So I'm not going to include him in my top 3. I am, again, like you, I'm going to put Emmett as number 1. Such a strong week. He's really emerging as that strategic force on the Brawn's tribe. And certainly winning all those challenges, 3 individual immunity wins in a row now, puts him in great stead. Again, Flick, she has an idol in the game. She's going to be my number 2. She has that alliance with Emmett, with Gerald as well. And certainly if she can create that bridge with Hayley, if Hayley can really create some chaos this next week and start to work against George, I think that's going to be an alliance which will probably last the duration of the season. And I will shift my final Tribal Council prediction there from Hayley and Baden to potentially Hayley and Flick. And we'll discuss the win edit down the line. Number 3, I'm going to put Gerald in number 3 for me. We haven't seen too much from him, But again, he's a core member of that alliance of Emmett, Flick, and Gerald. George and Kara, I exclude them because I think they're going to get caught out this next week. And George's lie for being the mole in the tribe is going to see him thrown under the bus. Again, though, I think Danny is a legitimate choice as well. But yeah, for me, the top three, Emmett, Flick, and Gerald. I really want more content from the dairy farmer, Gerald. We've missed out on a lot there. So I certainly think we see more. I hope we see more from him, from Way, from Andrew, from Laura, from Kara, these players that we haven't seen too much of. I'm really hoping that they stay the duration of the game and we get to see more of these characters as opposed to just focusing on Emmett, George, Haley, and Danny. As much as I love them, we've just seen so much of them at this point that I really want the edit to be a little bit more even at this point.
Yeah, so let's have a look at who's left in the game here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Brawns left in the game, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 old original Brains left in the game. So because of that, George going into this next episode and Kara remains to be probably two of the more important pieces on the table here that could potentially shift. You don't think the Brains will pull together potentially here and work together? That's a possibility, but now Haley's been scorned, so does she go back to the Brains who also betrayed her, didn't give her a heads up that the votes were coming her way in this episode? That's yet to be seen, but it's really an interesting landscape. Them losing Chelsea could potentially cost a lot of these Brawns the game moving forward here. And we do see in the next on Australian Survivor, George goes to the rest of the Brains, including Haley. I believe she was in that conversation as well, saying that the Brawns want to eat each other. They're trying to go at each other as well. So there's going to be some of the inner people that are going to go against each other. I think Emmett might be losing this next immunity challenge and people might gun for him being in that number one power ranking moving forward. But that's the power rankings. I do agree with you. We're pretty similar across what we think is the current landscape. Now, edit-wise, the person or the people that I still think is in the hunt to actually win this game, Haley is still my number one. It made absolutely no difference the fact that she was voted out. And in fact, I think it actually strengthened her case because of the fact that they didn't want us to leave the episode with her being on Redemption Rock. They wanted to immediately show her get back in the game by the end of the episode so that we maybe forget about the fact that she was voted out. I think it was very deliberately done in a way where, oh, she's voted out. Oh, she's right back in it on this episode. So leading into next episode, immediately we forget, oh yeah, Haley was voted out because she's there from the beginning of the episode. Smart editing, producers, but I'm on to you. Very, very confident. I'm even more confident now Haley is winning this show. Still going to be a massive feat. Still going to have to really work away from the bottom to get there. And maybe the angle to use now is, to say I've already been voted out. No one's going to give me the money at the end or going to vote for me. But then when she goes into that final tribal council, we know she's good with her words. We know she can put up a good case. She might be able to sway them to still vote for her based on the big moves that she needed to play to get there. Edit-wise, you still have to put George in the hunt. Like, I do agree with you. I think George is probably going to get voted out at some point. And he's going to get caught out. And I do think that the Redemption Rock is going to be his downfall ultimately, and Haley is going to be his downfall. She's going to get the better of him because she has come back in the game with a vengeance. And even if he kind of outplayed her a little bit at this point, it's not going to matter that much because she gets a second shot at him here. So I do think Haley and George has probably got the biggest, the most likely winner edits. Emmett has been in and out, but I do think he's got a big edit because he's been winning a lot of the challenges recently. He had a very weak start to the show, so I'll put him as a maybe somewhere in there. And then the other two people that you could probably put as maybes are like a Danny and like a Flick, but I see holes in Danny, Flick, and Emmett's games in regards to what they edit, because we've seen them doing things right, but also being on the outs quite a bit on certain votes or being outplayed by other people at different times in the game, like Flick being outplayed and outthought by Simon during certain parts of the early game, ultimately needing to be saved by Haley, not saving herself, not seeing how she saved herself. Danny thinking that she had the move here to take Simon out, but Haley getting the credit. George has got a lot of moves that he can own that we've seen him direct the strategy, and similar to Emmett. So that's why for me, the three strongest edits are Haley, George, and Emmett at this stage. Who would be your strongest edits in the game?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would throw Danny in there as well. I can see her potentially winning the game. But for me, it has been pretty cut and dry from day one, almost. Haley appears to be the one that, she's been narrating the story all along since day one. So I certainly think for Haley, she's definitely got the strongest case as a winner from what we've seen on the television. I do think if George wins, it will be very shocking. Certainly go down as one of the all-time greatest, most bombastic games of Survivor. I know I've heard from a lot of people hate George, a lot of people love George. And I came into the preseason not being a big fan of George. And I think George was aware of that as well. But certainly seeing him scramble every week and refusing to say die, somehow managing to come up with a new way to survive every single week. I've really come to appreciate just how far he's come in the game, how far he's scrambled. He's still standing, which is just amazing to me. I do want to mention with Jenny earlier in the chat, she said that there is probably going to be one more non-elimination episode now that Chelsea has gone home. And yeah, I think that's going to be the case. I think we are going to see another non-elimination episode. It probably wasn't planned, but now with Chelsea's elimination, it might force their hand to do so. And
they need to be voted out and come back.
With what we've seen so far, I am a little bit skeptical that it might be George that potentially benefits from one of those twists. But hey, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to put on my tinfoil hat just yet. But yeah, I would keep an eye out. Don't be too shocked if there is another non-elimination twist in the future. Certainly keep your eyes out for that one. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised. Based on how many episodes we've got left, it seems like that might be a sensible guess at this point. But I hope it doesn't impact the game too much. Going forward next week, though, Chris, we've got a massive battle planned between George and Hayley. So it's going to be, fireworks are going to be happening to see how Hayley comes back into camp and how she adjusts to the game.
100%. So a couple of last questions here. So guys, if you've got any last minute questions you want to throw at us, do it now or forever hold your peace. We're going to start off here with Dale. Do you guys think that there will be a final 3 or a final 2? I thought that final 3 due to the 48 days, but now Chelsea is Medivac. That's kind of made an 8-person jury. And I feel like another non-elimination might be coming, similar to what you've just said. I agree with you. It's going to be 2 most likely. I don't think they're going to change that format. If anybody can do it, it's Hayley. So Anthony believes that Hayley is the person to watch out for. Jenny is saying final 2, Chelsea's Medivac will mean we have, another non-elimination. Loyal says if Danny and Hayley work again, then little hope is there for Hayley. It's interesting. I do think Danny is too smart for Hayley. I've got a feeling that Hayley ultimately, like you said, Riley, I agree with you. She's probably going to go to Flick here as one of her main people. And Dale agreeing with me about the fact that they try to sneakily edit the show in such a way where they brought Hayley back at the end of the episode and have her there immediately at the beginning of the next episode so that we forget that she's potentially been voted out. Thursday Night Outcast here said that if Hayley wins, where does she rank in terms of best winners? I think we kind of explored that a little bit earlier on in the show. I think it's hard to tell you guys where we think that she's going to be without knowing how the rest of the season's going to play out and what she needs to do to get there. Like, she could still impress us, right? She's getting a second life in the game, but she can do some things that will make us impressed going in here to the end of the game. Loyal also says that he thinks that Emmett's cockiness will bring him down soon, and I do agree with that. And here Anthony says, my question, if we were on Survivor together, Chris, would you play with me like in the sand? Hey, Anthony, I would play with anybody that's willing to play with me, to be honest with you. Like, I would not put it past anyone. I do think one of my biggest problems would probably be the fact that even though I get the concept of how this game works and the fact that you need to backstab people and things like that, I do think that socially, I love getting along with people in general. And that would be something that I would have to be very aware of, that people will create friendships and things like that out there. But ultimately they want to backstab you to get to the end. So that would be something that I would need to focus on. I think that would be probably my biggest downfalls, that I would want to play with everyone, to be honest. And then Thursday Night Outcast here said, should both SA and Australia revert back to different locations for their next season? I'll leave that one for you. What have you thought, Riley, of the different locations that we've had this season? And I know that Australian Survivor is already earmarked to play in another part of Australia in the Australian Outback. One thing I will add to it, I would love to have Australia do a season close to where there's a beach somewhere again, maybe a bit closer to the water. But I know that's not where they're going.
It's not going to happen, just with the amount of coastline. Obviously, it's very populated, so they're not going to do it near a water. I suppose they could do it somewhere, maybe in the snowy mountains, but again, it'd be a little bit too cold. Just spitballing here. There are a lot of, maybe even the Gold Coast. I know I'm a Celebrity UK films over there, so that might be an option there for them to film in. But obviously they're going to Charters Towers next season, which is a little bit further north of Cloncurry, where they're currently filming, more towards Mount Isa, a couple hours west of Townsville there. So I'm looking forward to see how that goes. But certainly, I mean, Survivor South Africa's location this season, I've really enjoyed that. And again, Australian Survivor, it's great to see them in an outback environment. So it'll be interesting to see, if they do that in the future. Certainly, though, once COVID comes back to normal, I certainly think they're headed back to Samoa or Fiji, wherever they normally film. But yeah, I do like the Outback as a location. It's worked really well, and it does give them the opportunity to keep those keep the local production crew and build the challenges in Australia and transfer them throughout the country. So it does have its benefits there, and yeah, I've loved this location this season, and certainly next season as well. It'll be another Outback location, different scenery, but still the same great entertainment nonetheless.
Yeah, and it's the question here. Jenny asks is, should Australia and Survivor rotate locations? I've loved both the locations. I'm more than happy for them to rotate locations, and South Africa to play in Australia and Australia to play in South Africa. I think it's doable. Both countries has proven that it can host a Survivor show in those local locations. For South Africa, it'd be interesting because there is a very big difference in the budget that South Africa has for the show, which I believe is like, from what I've heard through the grapevine, a 50th of what the US Survivor has in a budget to be able to produce that show. And I do think that Australia is probably closer to half of what the US have, or something like that.
Quarter of the production budget for Australian Survivor when compared to the US.
There we go. So a big difference there, and that would also have something to do with where they can host the show and basically do it. But South Africa has got great locations as well that it can still explore, even in South Africa, that they can do. So I do hope if they do another season, I don't feel like it's taken away from these shows. I would watch another Survivor South Africa season playing in South Africa. I would even watch it at the exact same location, but maybe try a different part of South Africa, similar to what AU is going to do moving forward here as well. And I do think that is pretty much it. One thing here, Anthony says that he hopes that they move on from Fiji if pandemic ends. And I do want to say, I do agree with it. I'm kind of like, I'll still watch Survivor, but I'm kind of bored with having the same backdrop season after season after season. So I would be happy for them to go to a few of the other islands that are available as well, just so we've got a little bit of different scenery in the background. Riley, it's been great talking to you about Australian Survivor Week 5 on the podcast. It's been great having this great live crew here that have been asking us great questions tonight as well. We're hoping that we see you next week when we do all of this again at the same time at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And also, we will be live again this weekend to talk about Survivor South Africa, the latest episode. And we'll have on Sunday the latest Evicted Castaway to talk to as well. So a lot of content to look out for here. And also, if you're a fan of the challenge, I will be talking the challenge this weekend as well. Riley, anything exciting happening on the Snuffed YouTube channel at the moment?
Yeah, I got the story of JT Thomas, winner of Survivor Token Chains, coming up in the coming days. So keep an eye out for that one over on Snuffed, my YouTube channel.
Awesome. Guys, like I said, thank you very much for being here with us tonight. And I hope everybody has a lovely evening and a great day for those that are watching from South Africa as well. And we will be back on this weekend. Thanks, guys.